Welcome back to Spy Games. I'm with Dean Petit and with Oleg Kalugin. We're talking about your personal histories, especially as with the agency and with KGB, and how it affected your lives and the lives of your family. In maintaining secrecy, did that ever cause you any problems or any deliberation while you were working?
My advantage was that my wife was never jealous. She trusted me entirely. Sometimes I would come very late and sometimes in the morning. What did you do all the night? She would never ask questions. And honestly, I never tried to cheat on her. I did have some involvements, but operational ones. Emotionally, I stayed sound and safe, and I always loved my wife, you know. Again, she knew that, and for that reason, I truly had a wonderful experience,
In our early part of our marriage, before we had children, my wife worked at the CIA also, so she picked up an early appreciation for the secrecy. And
what did she do there?
Well, she was in the financial side of things, but she understood the need for secrecy, so it never became a problem. And like Oleg, she had good reason to trust me because I was also trustworthy in that sense. But we had a family joke. She would say, "Be careful who you take up with when you're away, because you'll be stuck with them." But I assure you that.
Right. Well, in fact, when I mentioned operational necessities, I may just cite one specific example. It relates to Canada, by the way. In the early 60s, when I was stationed in New York as a Radio Moscow correspondent, I bumped into a young lady. She was in her 20s. She worked for the Committee of Free Europe. That was one of the targets of the Soviet penetration. And I met her socially at some party, and I started courting her. And she seemed to be responsive, and I would spend time with her together. And at some point, I was close to asking her questions related to the documents she had access to. And I knew I got some already. And then at some point, she asked me a question, and I was probably foolish, so it's hard to say. She asked me a question, "Oleg, by the way, I really like you so much, but are you married by any chance?" And I said, "Yes, I'm married." That was the end of romance. She would say, "Oh, no way, I will not meet a married man anymore." I said, "Come on, we are friends. I like you so much. You're a wonderful person. No way, I will not go on dates with a married man." That was the end of it. What a shame.
Thank you both for joining us. Let's check in with Peter at the International Spy Museum. We're back with Peter, and we know a lot of spies historically have been ideologically motivated, but maybe that's not so much the case today. Or is it? Is it, Peter?
Well, that's an interesting question, because people commit espionage for a whole panoply of reasons. But if we take two of our most recent prominent cases, Rick Ames, Aldrich Ames, who was a CIA career officer and who chose to volunteer to be a spy for the Soviet Union, and was later, of course, as you know, tried, convicted, and is in jail for life. He had married for the second time. His wife was very ambitious, and he wanted to keep her to the style to which he thought she'd become accustomed, and that was one of his driving motives. I knew Ames. Ames worked for me in the agency. I knew him in the early days. Ames was, not everybody's cup of tea. I found him a likable fellow, spoke Russian. I used him on a couple of major cases for debriefings, and yet 1 week before he was arrested, he ran into me and was still running his cover story about having married a woman of wealth and so forth and so on. He was absolutely lying in his teeth, because by that time he was now an agent for the Soviets and had been regularly providing him with secrets for virtually 9 years. And I would take as another case, Robert Hansen, who was almost a contemporary of Rick Ames, but in the FBI. And he was someone who also volunteered to be a spy for the Soviet Union. Our understanding is, until the day he was captured by the FBI, the Soviet Union, the KGB, and later the successor to the KGB, did not know Hansen's real name. The question is, why did both of these men, family men with reasonable positions in their respective organizations, with access to an extraordinary range of secrets, become turncoats, betray their countries, their agencies, and their colleagues.
Why did they?
Why did they? Both of these people, Hansen and Ames, were fairly arrogant. They were bright. They felt they had not gotten the recognition that they deserved. Hansen had a large family. The money that he got, money and diamonds from the Soviets, enabled him to send them to private schools. He, at the same time, by the way, belonged to an archly, almost cult-like Catholic organization, Opus Dei, which is strictly conservative. Even the head of the FBI service belonged to the same organization. When Ames made the decision to commit espionage, he said one of the reasons he did it was because of his debts. His debts were $25,000. The average kid in school gets out of college and owes $25,000. It would not drive the average person to commit espionage. It drove Ames to do it, but that is because there were other factors there that also fed that motivation to make that intellectual and spiritual jump.